Okay, let's work on this in-app back button, which is supposed to take us back to the index page or any selected filters that we had if we selected them on that page. So for example, if we go back to the index page, select some filters like this, and then go to a single idea and hit back again, we want to remember those filters. And right now it doesn't. So let's go ahead and do that. So first, let me change the text. If you look at the design, it's actually all ideas or back to chosen category with filters. So let's do that first. It's in this show.blade.php, and it's not within a Livewire component. It's just within the Blade file here. So let's change that text first. What was it? It was or back to chosen category with filters. Okay. And initially I thought I had to keep track of the filters that we selected. So I was thinking of using something like session variables on this main page here, but it's actually much simpler than that. So we can make use of the previous method on the URL class in Laravel, and this will give us the previous URL of the last request that we visited. So not the current request, but the last request. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to dump it here in the view. So let's say I'm going to use the global helper, so URL previous, and let's see what this gives us. So I'm on the idea page here, or ideas index page, and let's select some categories here. Actually, let me refresh first, and we'll select considering, category 2, top voted. So now if I go to a single one, you'll see that it still remembers that. So considering, category 2, and top voted. So let's try that again with different filters. Implemented, category 4. Category 4 implemented. So that does work. So there's another case when we don't visit the index page and just visit this page directly. And in that case, it just returns the base URL. So let me show you. I'm going to grab this URL, open an incognito tab, paste this in, and we do get the base URL, which is fine for the back button. So yeah, that's all we have to do. So let's just grab this and put it within here. Actually, it should be in curlies. And that should be it. So if I refresh this, hit back, actually this case does require a conditional here. So let me put that dump back. So dump URL previous. And let me just grab this again and open a new tab. So on the first case, it is just the base URL, but if I refresh, then it's this URL. So we have to do a conditional here. So let me dump something else here. So let's dump URL full. Okay. So now we have two. So when they do match, we want to go back to the main page. But if they don't match, we can just use URL previous. So one more time, let me just grab this again, open a new tab. So again, when they're not the same, just use URL previous. But when I refresh and they are the same, then just go back to the index page. So we can do that in the controller. So instead of doing it directly here, let's just put that in the controller. Let's name it back URL. Let's get rid of these two. And let's go to our idea controller, and it's on the show method. And I'm just going to do it directly in here using a ternary. So back URL equals or arrow. So the case is if URL previous does not equal URL full, then we can just use URL previous. So let's do that. But if they are the same, then we can just go back to the index page. So let's do route idea index, and that should do it. Let's try this out. So if I refresh again, this should just take us back to the index page. But if we're on the index page first, let's select some filters here. Category 1, considering. Let's try that. Hit back, and if you see in the bottom left, it does work. Considering category 1. Cool. And you see that it is the correct one here. Let's try one more time. Top voted. And let's search for something, MOL. Go to it. Go back. And you see on the bottom left, it still works. Awesome. So I'm thinking if I should actually write a test for this, since it's a very simple use case. Let's write one anyways. So I'm going to put it in the show ideas test. Let's put it down here. And let's call this one, actually, let me just grab one of these. Let's grab the first one. So the setup is done for us. Grab this. And we don't need all these assertions, but we'll get rid of it here. Okay, let's get rid of all of this. So we only need one idea here. Okay, that's fine. The name of it will be in-app back button works when index page visited first. So we visit the index page first. We can add params here for the query string, but just to make it more clear, I'll just do it directly within here. So let's say slash category. Let's say category 2. Actually, we don't need this quote. And it should be a caps category space 2. But I'm going to add the escaped string here for space, and that's %20. If you look at the URL, it does add that when there's a space, as you see here. So category 2, and it's also say status equals considering. Okay, so we visit this on the index page, and then we visit the show page. So let's say route idea dot show, and we're visiting idea 1. And remember, we are using that back URL in the idea controller here. So I just want to inspect the value of this. So to get the value of that, we can just do, so let's just die and dump it for now. Response and the name of that variable. Actually, it should be array syntax. So let's say back URL, and that should be, in this case, it should be this URL here. So let's see if that works. Actually, let's just run the test. Okay, so as you see, it is the correct URL that we entered here, and it is remembering it correctly. So category 2, status considering. So now we just have to make sure that that string is the same. So we can use, let's see, this. I'm going to use the assert string contains string assertion on PHP unit, and we are searching for this part of the string within the variable. So let's put this in here, should be in quotes, and then we can just grab this, and then we no longer need this, and hopefully this passes if I did it correctly, and it does. Cool. And we can do something similar for the other case. So let's duplicate this, and let's rename it to when show page only page visited. Okay. So this is all the same. We are no longer visiting the index page, and we can just use assert equals here. Assert equals, and the back URL should be the index page. So we can just do route idea.index, and that should work, hopefully. And it does. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Very small feature, but pretty useful if you want to use a back button from within here. So I'm going to make some quick changes here. I'm going to add a proper URL for the logo here. So that should be an app blade PHP right here. Let's just go back to the home page. Okay. I'm also going to remove the link here. This should not be a link within the show page. So that should be in show.blade. Actually, no, that should be in idea show, the Livewire component. Not that one, the view. So yeah, this should not be a link. So let's remove that. Okay. Okay, so this is a link now. This is no longer a link. I think I put too much margin here. So let's remove some margin here. So yeah, this one is too much. So I'm going to remove the MD MX4 on this. So let's look for that. So it's not this one, it's this one, I believe, this one. I'm going to remove that. Okay. Okay, so that got rid of some margin. I also want to add some margin for the responsive view for the title, a little bit of margin top. So that should be here. So say margin top of 2 on mobile, medium, margin top of 0. Okay, there we go. And that's looking good. I think one more thing here. If you look at the URL, when we hover over these statuses, it just has these hash values here, which is the default that I added before I used Livewire. And I believe it's the same for the index page. Yeah, it is. So that's fine. But I actually want it to show the status that we're hovering over. So we can add that manually. So let's go to, I believe it's called status filters, our component here. And we can add it here. So yeah, it's just to show the correct URL because Livewire is taking over when we actually click on it. So let's do that. So let's use route. And it's going to go to the index page. And let's give it a param here. So for this case in particular, it's going to be status all equals all. And so let's see if this one works first, and then we'll add the other ones in. Let's try that out. I forgot the arrow here. Try again. Okay. And if you look at the bottom left, it does add the correct query string. So I'm just going to add the rest behind the scenes. Okay, so I added the rest in. Let's see if this works. Let's refresh. And status is all, considering, in progress, implemented, and closed. So yeah, that should still work. Let's make sure it works on this page as well. And it does. Cool. Let's make sure all of our tests are still passing. So let's do test parallel. And they are. Cool. So let's make a commit here. Episode 31. This is in-app back button. Forgot to quote here.